Punishing the president. Republicans win control of the Senate in midterm elections, riding a wave of dissatisfaction and frustration with Barack Obama. So how will this define Obama's final 2 years in office and his legacy? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. Barack Obama is facing the prospect of spending his final 2 years in office as a lame duck president. His popularity had already fallen to new lows as he lurched from crisis to crisis at home and overseas. Now voters have dealt him a punishing blow in midterm elections. Republicans have seized control of the Senate from his Democrats. It means they now hold both houses of Congress. Republicans had described the vote as a referendum on Obama's presidency. He will now have to contend with a Congress controlled by a party firmly opposed to his policies. To our discussion on what this will mean in a moment. First, Mike Hanna in Washington, D.C. reports on the changing balance of power.
The man who's likely to be the new Senate Majority Leader. Mitch McConnell celebrates his win in Kentucky, one far easier than predicted, and one that set the tone for a night of sweeping Republican gains in both houses of Congress.
Tomorrow, the papers will say, I won this race. But the truth is, tonight we begin another one that's far more important than mine. And that's the race to turn this country around.
A runoff was predicted in the Georgia Senate race amid speculation that neither candidate could achieve an outright win.
I think Georgians made it loud and clear tonight.
But what was supposed to be a close race became yet another comfortable Republican victory. There will be a runoff in Louisiana, and at least one Democratic senator who will live to fight another day.
Louisiana's worth fighting for. Join me. Let's get some rest tonight and hit the campaign trail in the morning. God bless you all. Thank you.
The Republicans increased their majority in the House of Representatives and took a number of governorships away from the Democrats, including President Obama's home state of Illinois. President Obama has invited leaders from both parties to the White House on Friday to discuss the way forward in the light of the new political reality. But emboldened by their emphatic victory, the new lords on the Hill are more likely to demand presidential compromise than seek it. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Capitol Hill.
Let's now welcome our guests who all join us from Washington, D.C. Philip Stutz, Republican strategist and former Get Out the Vote director for the Bush-Cheney campaign in 2004. Simon Rosenberg, president and founder of the New Democrat Network, a leading think tank based in Washington, D.C. And completing our panel is Bill Schneider, political analyst and distinguished senior fellow and resident scholar at Third Way. Welcome to you all, gentlemen. Let's be fair and go to the biggest losers here. Simon Rosenberg, I'm afraid that's the Democrats' camp. This must really hurt. What's been read into this?
Well, it's clearly, it was a big night for the Republicans. It's going to change Washington. And, you know, Democrats need to take some time to really think through about what happened here and what we're going to do next. I know I'm going to take a few days. I'm not going to be making big pronouncements, but it's certainly going to be, the city's going to change, and it certainly gives the Republicans even more optimism, I think, heading into 2015 and 2016 than they would have had normally. So it's a shock, and I think it's going to affect the last 2 years of the Obama presidency for sure.
I mean, I can't imagine what the atmosphere is like in the White House at the moment. We are waiting on Barack Obama to address this issue. Any inside information on what he's going to say and what he would like to say?
Look, he's, you know, in some ways, the most interesting part of this election is that if you look at what's happened in the United States, Our economy is improving. The deficit's come down. Gas prices are way down. The president's health care plan is clearly working. And so things are actually improving. I mean, last night, more people said the economy is getting better than it's getting worse. That's not been the case for many years. And so in many ways, the president's agenda has succeeded, but he hasn't. And I think that's going to make what he does next so important. And I think it's also a little bit of an area of caution for the Republicans because he may have lost the election last night, but it's not clear that his policies did.
Philip, the Republicans have been very good at brushing aside all the good news, anything successful that Barack Obama has done, and focusing on all the bad bits. Do you think that helped here? Was it the policies that the Republicans have put forward that are so successful?
Well, it's going to be interesting what they take next. I mean, I agree with Simon. I'm not sure this is a referendum for Republicans as much as it is a referendum against the president. The president came in to office and said he was going to change the culture in Washington. He was going to change the way Washington worked. He was going to reach across the aisle to Republicans. The fact is that he hasn't reached across the aisle to many Republicans. And if you read the Washington Post today, Harry Reid and his team don't think very highly of the president either. And I think it's a management style which has led to I guess across the country, people looking at this president and not having a favorable opinion of him. As far as the policies of the Republicans, I think we've got a very short window for Republicans and the president and Democrats to get along. I think there will be some policy advancements in tax policy. I think immigration policy will come up as well. And I think, although I have absolutely belief that we will not repeal Obamacare, I think we will work to fix Obamacare, fix the problems with it, and maybe Republicans and Democrats can get along on those issues until the 2016 presidential campaign kicks up, and then it's going to be a war all over again.
Bill, you were nodding away during that discussion about the successes and the failures that we saw. What do you make of what happened?
What I make of it is this morning, Democrats are waking up all over the country in a panic. They don't have the House. In fact, they lost seats in the House. They've lost the Senate. My God, if they don't keep the White House in 2016, the Republicans will control everything. And within a week of taking office, the new president and the Republican Congress will work to obliterate everything Barack Obama did, and in fact, everything Bill Clinton did. 16 years of Democratic presidents. Democrats are in a panic, and I think their first impulse is to beg Hillary Clinton to run. She's the only Democrat out there who stands a good chance of keeping the White House.
Yes, I've heard a lot of people already sending off their CVs. Bill, I want to put a poll to you, the ABC News Washington Post, saying that Barack Obama's favorable views have hit record lows in some areas, 43%. I mean, is he seen as being toxic? You weren't aware of his presence in the run-up to these elections and the fact that many in the party are distancing themselves from him.
I think he's seen as ineffectual. People agree with many of the things he wants, but they don't think he can deliver. He's a poor manager. The word incompetence has been used very often. He could not stop ISIS from making advances in the Middle East. He could do very little. He couldn't stop Putin from going into the Ukraine. He couldn't keep Ebola out of the United States. He hasn't been able really to turn the economy around in a convincing way for most voters. Even gun control, where most Americans agree with the president on the issue of background checks, he couldn't get an issue through the Senate. On issue after issue after issue, this president has been ineffectual, and that really demoralized his own party and was one reason why a lot of them didn't turn out to vote.
But Simon, how is it possible to be effective in the country when you've got the Republicans stopping you at every single point?
It's a great question. You know, I wrote earlier today that the great mystery of this election is how the Democrats could have lost so much ground given how much better everything is actually getting in the country.
But maybe Democrats haven't sold that point well enough.
I think clearly they didn't, and I think the decision, you know, look, I think it's a question in our system, and our system is unique in the world. But, you know, it's very hard to run away from the president in your own party. I mean, there was a lot of Democrats who distanced themselves. I think it's perhaps foolish to think that you can really provide enough distance and not inherit, what the president's done. And I think the Democrats in this cycle managed to get all the downside of the president and none of the upside. And I think there's going to be a significant debate in our party about whether or not this desire to run away, and to run away not from him, but also from his accomplishments and his agenda, was really the best strategy.
Philip, do you think that this victory could be a Pyrrhic victory for the Republicans, in the sense that they've got to now stop blaming everything that goes wrong on the Democrats, and the Republicans have to deliver? They have to work alongside, in some areas, Barack Obama.
Well, here's the deal. I think there's a point to that. But if you look at history, let's look back to 2006, which was President Bush's final midterm election. It was defined by many of the similarities. A foreign policy that was going poorly, a lot of controversies. We had Katrina in 2006. The controversies now are an incompetent government, whether it be, as Bill said, with Ebola, the porous borders over the summer, the Secret Service scandal, the IRS scandal. What people are really frustrated with, what voters are frustrated with, is this president said he was going to come into D.C., fix these things, work with everybody, and change Washington. He hasn't changed anything in 6 years. And so where did that lead after 06? It led to a crushing Democrat wave in 2006 and Barack Obama winning the president in 2008. And so if Republicans come out and lead the charge on a good legislative agenda that hands a Republican presidential candidate to be in a good position, I think that is the sort of the playbook for us. And it would be interesting to see if we come out, if the Tea Party people come out and really throw a lot of bombs, or if we can lay a foundation for a presidential candidate.
The division within the Republican Party, isn't it?
The division, well, there's going to be division in the Democrat Party right now. So right now, the Republicans are unified. I would like to see where we are in 12 months and 10 months. And I think there is a very good chance that we'll reach across the aisle, work with the president on economic reform, immigration reform, health care fixes to Obamacare, and foreign policy. I think we'll see a lot of those four issues, really the main ones, working with the president.
Bill, what do you disagree about with that?
What I disagree about is the Republicans are unified. They are not unified. What we're going to see is the leadership of the Republican Party, Speaker Boehner in the House of Representatives, the new Majority Leader Mitch McConnell in the Senate. They might try to negotiate, make deals, compromise with the president, because they want to show that the Republican Party can govern. Here's a little secret. The United States cannot be governed from Congress. Congress doesn't really have that power, maybe 100 years ago, but no more. What's going to happen is that the Republicans are likely to divide, and I think someone like Ted Cruz and the Tea Party Republicans will see this election as a mandate to obstruct Obama, to stand up to him, and to try to undo everything he did. And I think that's a looming split in the Republican Party, and we're going to see it continue right into the 2016 election.
And Bill, do you think the Republicans will take a swipe at the health care policy?
Well, they'll take a swipe. As long as Obama's in office, I agree that they can't get rid of it, but they'll try to make some serious changes in the health care policy. But I think with, something like 13 million people enrolled, many of them are happy with it. I don't think that they can just kill it.
All right, I want to turn now to what impact the midterm results will have on Obama's foreign policy. Al Jazeera's Lawrence Lee has been looking at this for Inside Story.
The midterm results paint the commander-in-chief as a lame duck waddling down the steps of Air Force One. And many Republicans who despise his style of government at home will also want to know how the US's foreign policy will be affected. And on issues ranging from the standoff with Russia to strategy against ISIL, the immediate perception is that a harder line is likely to be followed than President Obama would naturally want to pursue.
I think we're going to see a much more aggressive foreign policy from the United States. I think we're going to see much less foreign aid. I think the president's going to have a lot less room to negotiate with the Iran nuclear deal. He's going to have less room to negotiate when it comes to Ukraine. And I think that the U.S. peace process, any negotiations with Palestine and Israel, are going to get much more hawkish. I think Obama's going to be very constrained. He wants to make promises to the world, but he's going to have to come back and get approval from a Congress that doesn't want to work with him.
Little doubt that in Jerusalem, where Prime Minister Netanyahu has fought off increasingly strident criticism by the Obama administration, the government will feel it has a protective layer surrounding it in Senate and Congress. And in Russia, President Putin has proved impervious to threats of sanctions over Ukraine. He's unlikely to want to offer concessions to some of his strongest critics in Washington. Yet it may not automatically follow that more hawks in the Senate means a more hawkish foreign policy.
I think you'll see a more divided Senate, not necessarily a more hawkish one. The Republicans have been able to criticize Obama with one voice. They all agree that they don't like what he's doing. What they haven't been able to agree on is what we should be doing instead, whether the United States should pursue more engagement abroad, a different kind of engagement abroad, or focus more of its attention on domestic issues.
It finally happened.
So the reality may be that US foreign policy, already accused of a lack of focus, has even less direction in the next 2 years, as the Republican Party simultaneously restricts the commander-in-chief while working out a coherent strategy to take into national elections. In the end, that can only mean less American influence in the immediate future. Lawrence Lee for Inside Story.
Simon, how do you see Barack Obama dealing with more hawks, with more power, divided as that might be?
You know, this is a very good report, and it's a fascinating question. And I think that one of the things that's going to be very important for the Democrats to do is to differentiate between being tough and strong and smart and effective. You know, I think the Republicans, we have to remember, have had, you know, the last time they were in power, you could argue was we saw the greatest foreign policy disasters in American history. We saw the economy tank and we saw deficits explode. It's not as if they've got a strong track record of managing these tough issues well when they were in power. And certainly to go back to a Bush-era sort of style of engagement around the world is not something the American people want, or frankly governments around the world want either. So I think that there's going to be a real test for the Republicans to move beyond the way that they conducted this election, which was they closed the election with a set of unbelievably aggressive xenophobic appeals about that were not encouraging to those of us who want to see a more open America engaging in the rest of the world. And I think this is going to be an area of incredibly spirited debate, discussion, wrestling match, if you want to call it, in the months ahead. And I hope that we can come out of this with a more unified approach to the rest of the world. I'm not ruling that out, but I think certainly in the next few months it's going to be tough between the two parties.
Bill, we know that Americans complain about Barack Obama not being tough enough. They'd like to see him take a tougher stance here. What's it likely to be, though?
Well, the first test is going to come in Iran, where the United States is trying to negotiate a deal about their nuclear capabilities. And there, I think he's going to face a stiff resistance in a Republican Congress. They're going to be a very hard sell for any deal the president comes up with. And that's likely to be a showdown between the Democratic president and the Republican Congress. That's where Republicans are likely to take a very strong stand and probably will demand a deal with much more safeguards than the president is likely to get.
And Philip, possibly more sanctions? I mean, that could certainly scupper the deal with Iran, couldn't it?
Well, that seems to be where Republicans are going. I actually think Republicans are going to try to peel off a few Democrats, and so to make it more bipartisan. But there's definitely going to be a larger check on the president when it comes to foreign policy now. And the president's going to have, the president always says he's trying to reach across the aisle. This is a chance to do that with the Republicans.
Okay, Simon, where is Barack Obama going to focus his legacy on now? Iran surely must be one of them. What about the Palestinian-Israeli situation? I can't imagine much change happening there now.
Yeah, and look, I think the one big area that a lot of people have talked about that is more likely to happen now are the two major trade agreements the president's been negotiating in the Atlantic and the Pacific, which would do an awful lot to strengthen and renew the liberal international order, bring the global trading system into the modern digital age. These are real big legacy plays, and I think it's good foreign policy, it's good economic policy, it's the right thing to do. It's possible that gets easier to get done now with the Republican Senate and more Republicans in the House. I know that some of the Republicans have been talking about that, and that may end up becoming, frankly, as much of his focus for the next 2 years as anything that's going on in the Middle East today.
Bill, because there are no obvious foreign policy victories here, are there?
No, they're not. And even with a Republican Congress, there's very little public support for sending American troops on the ground. That really would not be a very good move, and it would be extremely unpopular in the country. I think what's likely to happen is that the president is going to get trade agreements. Look, when Bill Clinton was president, his signature policies were all supported by Republicans. Free trade, including NAFTA, welfare reform, a balanced budget. Democrats weren't enthusiastic about any of those policies. There is a possibility of a bipartisan coalition on a lot of these issues, but there's likely to still be showdowns. Israel and Palestine, I think he made a good effort. John Kerry made a good effort. But so far, that seems to be a dead end.
And Philip, obviously no attempts to change the military plan, and of course the Republicans can't do that even if they wanted to.
Well, I just think it's a false narrative to say that Republicans want boots on the ground. Listen, if you go in and out and you poll across the country, nobody wants boots on the ground. I think the frustration from Republicans was the president took boots off the ground on day one. He lifted off the table. So our enemies now know what we're going to do. And this goes into a larger narrative that the president makes these grand statements, whether it's the red line in Syria, we're not going to help in Ukraine. The foreign policy has been bungled over and over and over again, and it again plays into that this president doesn't seem to be very competent. And I think what the Republicans can do is add some backbone to the president over the next 2 years and have a stronger foreign policy that's more unified.
Bill, what did you want to say?
The one issue on which he might try to seek compromise, where the Republicans have a strong interest in making a deal, is immigration, what to do with illegal immigration. There, Republicans know that they are simply doomed in the future if they don't reach out to the growing number of minorities and immigrant communities in the United States.
I mean, they have to do that, otherwise they're going to, again, excuse me, jumping in here, scup any chances for the 2016 elections. With the Latinos.
That's right. They know they have to do something. And that's one area where the president, he's made that his top priority for his second term, and he just might be able to make a deal on that with Republicans, although the issue is likely to split Republicans. But with solid Democratic support and a large number of Republicans in Congress coming along, I think he could get something on immigration reform.
Simon, he's had a horrible second term. And he could possibly have a horrible final 2 years. What do you think he's going to focus on now, and what are the Democrats' projections?
You know, I don't know, but I think that it would be, it's likely that he will continue to try to advance policies that he thinks is going to help continue to grow the American economy and help the middle class. He's going to fight and protect the ACA, the health care plan, because it's working, and it's clearly his great domestic legacy. I think he has to try to shore up his foreign policy and some of the things we discussed earlier, advance the 2 big trade deals. And I'm much less optimistic about us being able to get a deal on immigration reform than others, even though this is something I've worked on every day of my life for the last decade. Every Republican who was elected to the Senate last night is against comprehensive immigration reform. There's now a majority of senators on the Republican side who are publicly against what Democrats would consider to be the core of reform. And so I think the Republican Party is actually moving away from being in a place where they could really find common ground with the Democrats on what we would consider to be meaningful reform. So I still think that if you go through that agenda, that's a lot. And I think it's going to be a busy 2 years. And certainly, I think one of the most important things that we just haven't talked about is how what is going to be a very contentious Republican primary is going to affect the Republicans in Congress, particularly since 2, 3, maybe 4 of the Republicans running for president are going to be in the Senate. It's going to be a wild 2 years on the Republican side, and we don't really yet know how that's going to impact all of this either.
I thought I'd end this with an interesting little sidebar poll here that Americans apparently are fed up with all of their politicians, not just the president. Gentlemen, thank you very much for talking to us on Inside Story. Philip Stutz, Simon Rosenberg and Bill Schneider. And we're always interested to hear what you have to say. You can leave your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. We're also on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. I'm Jane Dutton. Thanks for watching.